The world knew her as Leona Blake, heiress to the Blake tech fortune, international darling of fashion magazines, and permanent fixture on the most envied lists. But to herself, on the nights when the cameras were off and the world forgot she existed, she was just Leona, a young woman, drowning in a life built for someone else. It was 2:03 a.m. when she stood before the antique mirror in her penthouse bedroom. Her mascara was smudged from tears she hadn't planned on shedding. The Cartier necklace weighing down her collarbone sparkled under the soft lights, but even that couldn't distract her from the hollow ache gnawing at her chest. She looked beautiful, flawless, cold. The gala that evening had been perfect, a celebration of her father's latest AI acquisition. The press had called her radiant, effortlessly elegant, and the jewel of the evening, but none of them saw the way her fingers trembled behind her champagne glass, or how she counted down the minutes until she could be alone. As she peeled off her custom-made silk gown, something inside her snapped. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a slow unraveling of the mask she had worn for 24 years. She sat at the edge of her bed, feet touching the cool marble floor. Outside, Lagos glittered with the chaos and charm of a city that never truly slept. She watched it, detached, like someone peering into a world they didn't belong in. Her phone buzzed. "Dad, proud of you tonight." Vogue called. Great exposure for the family. Exposure. That was all she ever was, a billboard for perfection, a living PR campaign. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes. Leona Blake had everything anyone could dream of. A Rolls-Royce that waited for her like a loyal dog, a personal chef who prepared calorie-perfect meals, an Instagram account with 6 million followers, and a life curated to the last sparkle. But she had no real friends, no one she could call at 2 a.m. just to say she couldn't breathe. Everyone wanted something. Access, validation, clout. Her smiles were rehearsed, her kindness expected. Her life? A performance. She thought about her mother, late Evelyn Blake, who had died when Leona was just 10. Her mother had been the only person who ever told her, "You don't have to shine all the time to matter." But Evelyn was gone and Leona had been shining ever since. That weekend, another event loomed, a charity art show her father insisted she attend. Leona wanted to refuse but knew better. She showed up in a lavender gown, hair curled just right, with a smile so convincing it fooled even the sharpest paparazzi lens. It was there, tucked behind a rusted metal sculpture of a crying boy, that she met Jayden. He wore jeans, real ones. Not the kind that cost half a salary. A simple tee, camera slung across his chest. He looked like he belonged in the background, but Leona saw him clearly. She paused when he raised his camera toward a vendor selling local bracelets. "You're not with the press," she said without thinking. Jayden looked up, confused for a moment. Didn't realize it was illegal to take pictures of cool things. She was taken aback. No one ever spoke to her like that, not without checking her name first. "I just meant—" She hesitated, then smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "You're not dressed like the rest of the vultures." He laughed. "Neither are you. You look like someone who wandered in from another planet." She didn't tell him her name, didn't correct him when he said, "You look familiar. Are you in one of those reality shows?" Leona smiled slyly. "Something like that." And just like that, Elle was born. She lied. Said she was an up-and-coming actress named Elle Monroe. Told him she lived in a shared apartment with 2 roommates and was in between gigs. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? Not everyone lived in the orbit of the elite. Not everyone scrolled through Forbes's richest daughters list in their spare time. Jayden offered her a bracelet from the vendor's stall. "You've got that starving artist energy. Might bring you luck." Leona, Elle, laughed, a real laugh. "I'll take it." She wore the bracelet back to her father's mansion, slipped it under her diamond cuff where no one would see it. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed Jayden's words, his voice, his ease. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. By Monday, Leona had created a full backstory for Elle Monroe. She rented a modest studio flat in Lecky Phase, one under a different name, cash only. She filled the space with secondhand furniture and old art prints she bought from roadside stalls. It smelled like dust and freedom. For the first time in her life, Leona took a Danfo bus, sat squashed between a woman selling boiled eggs and a man snoring into his newspaper. No one looked at her twice. No one cared that her lashes weren't done or that she wasn't smiling. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. She found a part-time gig on a music video shoot, working behind the scenes as an assistant's assistant. She fetched coffee, took notes, and got yelled at for not understanding camera angles. She loved it. Every bruise on her hand, every drop of sweat, every moment someone said, "Hey, Elle, pass me the gaffer tape," instead of, "Leona Blake, smile for the press." That weekend, she saw Jayden again, accidentally on purpose. He was photographing kids playing football under a bridge, using natural light to capture movement. She walked up nervous, unsure if he'd recognize her. "Hey, you," he said, squinting. "Actress girl." She grinned. "Still trying." They shared suya and chilled Fanta while sitting on the hood of his old car, talked about art, music, and what freedom meant. He told her about his dream to open a community art gallery for underprivileged youth. "You believe in beauty that changes people," she said. He looked at her. "Don't you?" She wanted to say yes. But what she really wanted was to believe it. That night in her penthouse, her father called her into his study. "You've been disappearing, Leona," he said. "I've been thinking," he sighed. "That's dangerous. We have an image to maintain." She looked at him, at the empire he had built, the brand he had turned her into, and for the first time she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to be a brand anymore. She wanted to be real. Leona hadn't realized how loud silence could be until she was alone in the tiny Lecky studio apartment. No maids, no private chefs asking what she'd like for breakfast, no security personnel stationed by the door. Just her, a mattress on the floor, and the slow creak of a ceiling fan fighting valiantly against the Lagos heat. And yet, she had never felt more at peace. Gone were the long days of press meetings and charity galas. Now she spent her mornings brushing her own hair, making toast that sometimes burned, and choosing from her very small wardrobe, a mix of jeans, graphic tees, and 2 dresses she'd found at a thrift market in Yaba. She even learned how to do her own laundry, watching YouTube tutorials on hand-washing stubborn stains out of white shirts. In this life, no one called her Leona. She was Elle Monroe, the broke but cheerful assistant in the creative department of a startup production house. No one cared about her last name. In fact, most of her co-workers thought she was a university dropout hustling her way into Nollywood. And strangely, she didn't correct them. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise and took a rickety kiki to the bus park, switching routes 3 times before arriving at the studio. The first few days, she got laughed at for not knowing where to stand or for offering too much change to the conductor. But now the other passengers greeted her with nods and jokes. She was becoming invisible, ordinary, and it felt glorious. Her life began to split into 2 clear halves. By day, she was Elle. She helped the crew with scripts, arranged camera gear, and often ran errands in the hot sun. It was exhausting, but her heart beat with purpose she'd never known before. By night, she slipped back into her real identity, just long enough to make appearances at home, keep up with family events, or occasionally calm her father's paranoia. She had to be careful. If anyone found out what she was doing, especially her father, it would be over. But the more she lived as Elle, the harder it became to put Leona's mask back on. One Sunday afternoon, she visited Jayden's neighborhood. They hadn't exchanged numbers. He wasn't on social media. He told her, "I like the mystery," but she remembered him mentioning where he volunteered, an after-school arts program in Surulere. She showed up with a bag of donated paints and sketch pads and pretended it was from her TV crew. The kids adored her. Jayden was surprised, but happy. "Elle Monroe, crashing my safe space," he teased. "You told me about this place. I wanted to see the magic." Jayden smiled. "Come inside then. These kids could use some magic today." They spent the afternoon with chalk-stained hands and laughter echoing off the cracked classroom walls. One of the girls, barely 6, tugged at Elle's sleeve and whispered, "Are you a princess?" Elle knelt, heart catching in her throat. "Why would you think that?" "'Cause you smile like the girls in the movies. But your eyes are tired like mummies," when she's sad. That night, Ella sat on the floor of her apartment, knees to her chest, the little girl's words spinning in her mind. She had spent so many years being a princess, smiling for cameras, walking carpets, signing autographs, but none of it ever felt as true as that one messy afternoon in Surulere. One Wednesday evening, after a particularly long day on set, Jayden walked her home, not to her real penthouse, but the tiny Lecky studio. She hesitated at the door, heart pounding. "Let me guess," Jayden said. "It's a mess. You weren't expecting company, and there's probably half a loaf of bread and 2 eggs in the fridge?" She laughed. "Wow, you've been spying." "No," he said, looking at her closely. "Just, I get the sense you're always trying to prove you're okay. But I think it's okay to let people in." She pushed the door open. "Well, welcome to the glamorous world of Elle Monroe." The apartment smelled like citrus air freshener and instant noodles. A lone canvas painting of a woman flying over Lagos rooftops hung above the mattress. Jayden paused in front of it. "You did this?" "Yeah," she said softly, "back when I thought art could fix everything." "It still can," he replied without looking away. They ate egg sandwiches and sat on the floor, listening to the city hum outside. "So, why acting?" he asked. She hesitated. "I guess it lets me be someone else, someone free." "You don't seem like someone who's ever been trapped." She met his eyes. "That's because I've become really good at hiding it." A beat of silence. Jayden reached into his bag and handed her a Polaroid photo. It was her, laughing while one of the kids from Surulere splashed her with paint. "You didn't even notice I took it," he said. She stared at the photo, something twisting in her chest. "That's the realest version of you I've seen." The next week, Ella missed 2 calls from her father. The third time she picked up. "Leona, where the hell have you been?" "I've been working," she said carefully. "Working? You mean rehearsing for that film they offered?" "No, I turned it down." "You what?" "It didn't feel right." There was silence. Then his voice, low and sharp. "You're starting to sound like your mother." And that was the highest praise she could have asked for. Things began to shift after that. She spent more time with Jayden, exploring the hidden parts of Lagos. Old bookstores, rooftops turned into jazz bars, abandoned train stations that echoed with the sound of unsung dreams. They talked about love, identity, and what it meant to live a life that mattered. He opened up too. "My dad left when I was 10, he told her one evening. "Mom raised me on a teacher's salary. There were nights we didn't eat, but she never let me feel poor. She always said, 'We're not broke, we're becoming.'" Ella touched his hand gently. "You became someone incredible." He smiled. "Not yet. But maybe with you around." She froze. That was the first time he said something that hinted at more. More than friendship. More than this fragile lie she was living. Later that night, she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror of her tiny apartment. No makeup, no jewelry, just her, Elle. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure who that really was anymore. Was she the billionaire's daughter still running from her name? Or was she becoming someone else entirely? The lines were blurring. And she was starting to fear what would happen when Jayden found out the truth. Because he would eventually. And when he did, would he still see her as real? It was a quiet Thursday morning when Elle, realized the lie was no longer something she was performing. It was something she was living, and it was changing her. She had just finished helping Jayden paint a new mural for the Community Arts Center in Surulere. Sweat dripped down her spine, her arms a mess of teal and orange splashes. Jayden, barefoot on a scaffold, leaned down to smudge a streak of blue across her nose, laughing when she squealed. They were close. Too close. When he reached for her waist to steady her, it felt natural, like they had known each other longer than a few months, like her heart had finally remembered its rhythm after years of pretending. But deep down, a storm brewed. She wasn't Elle Monroe, the quirky assistant/artist with a passion for color and people. She was Leona Blake, billionaire heiress, and the face of an empire that had made her life a stage since the day she was born, and Jayden had no idea. Later that night, Leona sat alone in her Lekki apartment, staring at the mural photo she had taken earlier. She looked happy, but she also looked like a liar. She picked up her phone. The temptation to tell him the truth had been growing louder. But then she remembered the look on his face when he once said, "People like us, we build with honesty. We don't have the luxury to pretend." What would he say if he found out she'd been pretending the entire time? What if the very thing that had drawn them together, the simplicity, the authenticity, shattered the moment her real identity came to light? She dropped the phone on the mattress and buried her face in her hands. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about integrity, and she was running out of both. The next few days passed in a blur of shoots, errands, and art classes with the kids. Jayden had invited her to help co-lead a Saturday workshop for aspiring teen photographers. He even introduced her as the girl with the best eye for beauty in this city. She had smiled, blushed, but the guilt settled in her chest like a stone. Every time she heard him speak about truth, about building a future that meant something, she felt like a fraud. It didn't help that her real life, the one she was running from, was creeping in through the cracks. A driver from the Blake estate showed up at the studio claiming to be making routine checks. An anonymous gossip blog posted a blurry photo of Leona Blake's penthouse light on during a night she was supposedly in Monaco. Her father's assistant sent her a cold text. "Your absence is drawing attention. Mr. Blake expects you at next week's private gala." Leona sighed. No matter how far she ran, the world she came from still had a tight grip on her ankles. The following Friday, Jayden asked her to meet him at a rooftop spot in Victoria Island. It overlooked the ocean and the sparkling lights of the bridge. He said it was his favorite place to breathe. When she arrived, he was already there. Shirt sleeves rolled up, camera beside him, 2 chilled bottles of water in his hands. "I was starting to think you stood me up," he said, but smiled. She didn't smile back. Not fully. He noticed. "Everything okay?" She sat beside him. I've been thinking. About? About how people sometimes hide things. Not to hurt others, but to protect themselves." Jayden turned toward her. "That sounds like someone preparing to confess something." She let out a hollow laugh. "Maybe I am." He didn't press her. He just sat there waiting. She looked at him. Really looked. His eyes held patience. His hands, calloused from years of camera work, rested lightly on his knees. This man, he wasn't like the ones at her father's parties. He wasn't chasing status. He wasn't seduced by flash. He was real, and that scared her more than anything. Because real people got hurt when you lied. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Instead, she whispered, "Do you believe someone can live 2 lives at once?" Jayden thought for a moment. "Only until the truth demands one of them dies." Her breath hitched. He turned toward her. "Elle, what are you not telling me?" There it was. The question that could change everything. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed. The screen flashed. "Dad, arrive early for the gala. Dress formal. Vogue is covering." She swiped the phone off, but Jayden had seen the name. "Your dad?" he asked casually. She nodded slowly, the lie taking shape before she could stop it. "Yeah, just a distant relative. Pushy." Jayden gave her a half smile. "You're full of surprises, Elle." And for the first time, he didn't sound amused. That night, Jayden didn't walk her home. He said he had edits to finish. She nodded, heart heavy. They parted with a soft wave, no hug, no photo. When she got back to her apartment, she stood in front of the mirror, as if trying to find the line between the 2 women she had become. Ella had his heart, but Leona held the secret. And secrets, she knew too well, always came with a price. The night of the gala arrived. Leona was draped in an emerald green custom dress, hair swept into a low chignon, diamonds winking at her throat. Flashbulbs popped as she stepped out of the Rolls Royce. Her father beamed beside her, the image of power and poise. She smiled. She waved. She lied. Inside the ballroom, while media elites and foreign investors toasted her presence, Leona felt like she was floating above it all, like Ella was watching from the shadows, disappointed. As she toasted with a glass of champagne she barely touched, her mind wandered to Jayden, probably at the studio, editing, unbothered by her absence, or maybe, just maybe, beginning to suspect. Because people like Jayden weren't fools, and she was dangerously close to being found out. She left early, shed the gown, removed the lashes, washed off the red lipstick. Back in Lekki, the apartment welcomed her like a long-lost friend. She reached for her phone. There was a message from Jayden. "Who are you really, Elle?" She stared at the screen, pulse pounding. The time for running was ending. Soon she'd have to answer. And this time, the truth would no longer wait. The next morning, the air in Lekki felt heavy, thick with the weight of something inevitable. Leona sat at her tiny dining table, her untouched cup of tea now lukewarm. Jayden's message echoed in her mind. "Who are you really, Elle?" She had stared at it for hours, typed out a dozen replies, deleted them all. How do you confess that everything, the late-night suya, the barefoot dancing, the paint-smudged afternoons, was real except your name? How do you tell someone who trusted you that you built your love on a lie? She picked up her phone again. No new messages. A knock at the door startled her. She froze, heart racing. Another knock. When she opened it, Jayden stood there. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. Just stepped inside and looked around, like seeing her apartment for the first time with new eyes. His gaze landed on a glossy magazine cover poking out from under a stack of books. The headline read, "Leona Blake shines again, the heiress who can do no wrong." He didn't touch it, just stared. Then finally, quietly, he spoke. "So it's true." She opened her mouth, but no words came. "Your name's not Elle Monroe. You're Leona Blake, daughter of Oscar Blake, the woman on every billboard, the one people either worship or hate." She nodded slowly. "Yes." Jayden turned away. "And everything else? Was that a lie too?" "No," she whispered. "None of that was a lie. Just the name, the family, the life I left behind." He laughed bitterly. "You say that like it's small, like it's just a pair of shoes you forgot to mention." "Tom," Leona stepped forward. "Jayden, please, let me explain." He spun around. "Explain what? That you played me? That I opened up to someone who doesn't even exist?" "I do exist," her voice cracked. "Elle was the truest part of me. The only part that wasn't built by money, or my father, or magazine editors. I wanted something real." Jayden's voice dropped. "And you thought real could come from lies?" She flinched. "I didn't plan this. I didn't expect to meet you. I was drowning in my world. Pretending to be Elle gave me air. Then you happened. You made everything feel real. And yet," he said coldly, "I still don't know who I've been falling for." There it was. The words neither of them had said aloud until now. Falling for. And just like that, it shattered. Jayden left. He didn't slam the door. He didn't raise his voice. But the silence that followed felt louder than any goodbye. Leona collapsed onto the floor, her knees hitting tile, her body folding in on itself. She had always feared being unloved for who she was. Now she was unloved for pretending to be someone else. The next few days passed in a haze. She didn't go to the studio. She didn't answer calls. Her father sent a car to pick her up, but she told the driver she wasn't leaving. She stayed in that apartment, her apartment, because it was the only place that still felt like hers. She cried until her chest ached. cried for Jayden, for herself, for the little girl who once dreamed of being known just for who she was, not whose daughter she happened to be. The community center texted. The kids missed her. She didn't go. Jayden didn't call. She didn't expect him to. On the fifth day, she gathered everything that had built the illusion: her fake ID card, the thrift store clothes, the notebook where she'd sketched out Elle's backstory, and placed them in a box. She wasn't sure if she was bearing a lie or mourning a loss. Maybe both. That evening, her father called again. "Leona, you've made your point. Come home. We'll spin this. Maybe say it was research for a documentary series. We'll rebrand." She stared at the wall. "I'm not coming back," she said softly. "You're being foolish." "No, for the first time I'm being honest." Her father's voice hardened. "You're throwing away everything we built." "No," she said. "I'm finally building something of my own." And she ended the call. 2 more days passed. Then came the knock on the door. This time it wasn't Jayden. It was Mrs. Adebayo, the center's director. "I know everything," the older woman said gently. "Jayden told me." Leona braced herself. But instead of judgment, Mrs. Adebayo offered her a hug. "You hurt him, but you also changed him," she said. "That boy never let anyone in, until you." Leona's eyes welled up. "You don't have to fix everything overnight," the woman added, "but don't run from the mess. Sometimes cleaning it up is where we find who we really are." The next day, Leona returned to the studio. The kids screamed her name, "Miss Elle!" and wrapped their arms around her. She smiled through tears. Jayden wasn't there, but his mural was, a new one. A faceless woman surrounded by colors, vibrant, wild, chaotic, but her chest was transparent, and inside her chest he had painted a heart. Not broken, not perfect, just honest. That evening, Leona walked to the beach where they once watched the sunrise after a night shoot. Jayden was there, camera hanging loose around his neck, barefoot in the sand. He didn't turn when she approached, but he didn't walk away either. She stood beside him, quiet, then spoke. "I'm sorry, not just for the lie, but for thinking I had to become someone else to be worthy of your love." Jayden turned to her slowly. "I wasn't angry because you lied," he said. "I was angry because I believed every moment was real. And I felt like a fool." "You weren't," she whispered. "You were the only real thing in my life." He stared at her for a long time, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the Polaroid photo, the one of her laughing with pain on her face. "I kept this," he said, "because I knew that version of you was real. I just didn't know her name." "She's me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My name is Leona, but I'd give up all of it if it meant getting another chance with you." He stepped closer. "You don't have to give up who you are," he said. "I just need you to be all of it, with me. No lies, no masks." "I can do that," she said. He wiped a tear from her cheek. And in that moment, there were no billionaires, no secrets. Just 2 people who had hurt, healed, and were still choosing each other. The sun rose slowly over the Lekki horizon, spilling golden light across the floor of Leona's apartment. She sat cross-legged on the cool tiles, a notebook on her lap, and silence in the air around her. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt full, like something new was about to begin. Jayden hadn't promised her forever that night on the beach, but he had stayed. And more than anything, that mattered. No declarations, no staged forgiveness. Just truth. Honest, complicated, human truth. In the days that followed, Leona didn't return to her father's penthouse. She didn't update her socials or post carefully curated photos. She didn't even check the media storms swirling around her disappearance. She had other priorities now. She began working full-time at the community center in Surulere, not as the Blake heiress, not even as Elle Monroe, just as Leona, the woman with a heart for color, chaos, and connection. She taught art classes to children who had never touched a canvas before. She swept the floors after workshops. She helped fix leaky faucets. She learned how to make chin in bulk for weekend fundraisers. And she had never felt more useful. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Jayden kept his distance at first, not because he was angry, but because they were both rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, like walking barefoot on glass, choosing each step. Sometimes he'd walk into the center mid-morning, hand her a fresh Zobo in a takeaway cup, and leave without a word. Other times he'd hang around, camera in hand, capturing shots of kids mid-laughter, teachers mid-lesson, her mid-smile. They didn't label what they were. They didn't need to. One afternoon he asked her, "What happens next for you?" And Leona, for the first time, had an answer that didn't include PR agents, gala schedules, or curated Instagram grids. "I think I want to start something here," she said. "A nonprofit, real funding, real structure, a place where kids like these can dream bigger." Jayden looked at her like he was seeing her again for the first time. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I have the means. I have the vision. And this time, I'll build it from truth, not from image." That night, she went home and opened her laptop. For the first time in weeks, she logged into her Blake Tech portfolio. Her trust fund sat untouched, quietly growing interest. She stared at the digits. More money than most people would ever see in a lifetime. She clicked withdraw. Not all of it. Just enough to fund an entire year's worth of programs, supplies, salaries, and meals at the center. It felt like shedding old skin. The next day, she walked into the Blake estate in Victoria Island. It was the first time she'd returned in nearly a month. Inez, the guards looked surprised. Her father was on the phone in his study. He didn't pause when she entered. "Is this about the Monaco deal? Tell them we're not moving a single percentage until—" "Dad," she said softly. He looked up, brow furrowed. "Leona." "I'm not here to negotiate," she said. "I'm here to let you know I've started a foundation. I'm naming it after Mom. It's based in Sur-L'Air. It will serve artists, students, and kids who don't have the doors I had." His face hardened. "And I suppose you'll be turning this into a documentary? A branding play?" She shook her head. "No. No cameras, no press. Just purpose." He stood. "You're throwing your life away. You were born for more than this." "I am more than this," she said firmly. "But I'm finally choosing what kind of more I want." He stared at her. For the first time in her life, he seemed small. Not because he wasn't powerful, but because she had finally become someone who no longer needed to please him to feel worthy. "I love you," she said gently, "but I don't need your approval anymore." And she left. Weeks passed. The Evelyn Foundation launched quietly. No magazine covers, no grand unveiling, just a chalkboard sign, a new coat of paint, and a waiting list of eager students. Jayden volunteered as the lead photography instructor. The kids adored him. One evening, they hosted a community showcase. Parents packed into the repurposed hall, admiring their children's paintings, poetry, and pictures. A little boy tugged on Leona's dress and said, "Miss Leona, I want to be a big artist too." She bent down. "You already are." Jayden watched her from across the room, his camera momentarily forgotten. Later, as they packed up empty cups and folded chairs, he handed her a framed print, a photo of her laughing with her students, paint on her cheeks, hair pulled back, joy spilling from her eyes. On the back, he'd scribbled, "The woman who made her own name matter." Leona blinked back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. He touched her face gently. "You saved me too, you know." "I lied to you." "You told me the truth in the end," he said, "and you lived it." They sat outside as the night breeze wrapped around them. "I never imagined I could be this happy without the money, the mansion, the cameras," she said. Jayden chuckled. "You're still rich, Leona." "In what way?" She smiled. He kissed her cheek. "In the way that matters." Sometime later, the tabloids caught wind of her foundation. They tried to make it a story. "Heiress goes rogue," one headline read. Billionaire's daughter abandons fortune for charity, another shouted. But she didn't care. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was choosing. And this time she was choosing truth, choosing love, choosing herself. The scent of jollof rice filled the air as the Evelyn Foundation's Saturday event buzzed with music and laughter. Local vendors lined the front lawn, kids ran with face paint and balloons, and Leona stood barefoot under a mango tree, watching it all unfold. It had taken just 6 weeks for this dream to bloom. The foundation now ran 5 weekly classes in art, photography, drama, and storytelling. Jayden's photo wall, a rotating gallery of student work, was the most popular feature. It was all working. And Leona, for the first time in her life, wasn't performing. She was present, grounded, happy. But peace, she had learned, was fragile, and hers was about to be tested. She was mid-conversation with a local journalist, one of the few she trusted, when her phone buzzed with back-to-back notifications. Vox Africa, Eras turned activist Leona Blake, resurfaces in Surulere. Elite Lagos. Is Leona Blake done with the billionaire life for good? Celebrity spy Nasia. The Blake princess spotted with unknown man. Is this her secret lover? Leona's throat tightened. She clicked one of the links. There it was. A clear photo of her handing out fruit at last week's fundraiser. Her name tagged, her full face shown, and beside her, unmistakably, was Jayden, grinning in the background, camera in hand. The caption, mystery boyfriend revealed, meet the man who stole Leona Blake's heart. She felt her stomach twist. Jayden didn't know. He hadn't seen it yet. She looked up, and her heart dropped. He was walking toward her, holding 2 drinks, smiling like the world was still theirs. They sat behind the gallery room, beneath the shade of a jacaranda tree, when she finally showed him. He stared at the screen in silence, then scrolled, then locked the phone and handed it back to her. Leona swallowed. Say something. Jayden looked at her with tired eyes. I thought we were done hiding. We are. I didn't do this. I never told anyone. I know, he said softly. I didn't think it would find us here. Not like this. She nodded. Neither did I. He leaned back against the wall. They'll follow us now. Everywhere. They'll dig up everything. My mom's shop, the center, the kids. I'll protect them. How? He asked. You can't unmake your name, Leona. Her heart broke a little at the way he said her name. Like it belonged to someone else again. That night, the cameras came. They didn't storm the gate. They hovered, waiting. By morning, 3 paparazzi vans were parked outside the foundation, lenses trained on the entrance. Volunteers had to use the back gate. Parents hesitated to bring their children. Leona stood at the balcony and watched it unfold, guilt tightening around her throat. Jayden didn't speak much that day. He moved mechanically through his class, barely touching his camera. At lunch, he sat with his back to the wall. She approached him, hesitant. I can make a statement, she offered. Draw the attention away. He didn't look at her. They'll spin it either way. A long pause. Then, Jayden, I never wanted you to be collateral damage. He met her eyes. And yet, here we are. The board of the foundation called an emergency meeting that evening. 2 major donors had pulled out. A few parents wanted to transfer their children to less exposed programs. One of the board members, a stern woman named Toke, leaned forward. You're an asset, Leona, but now you're also a risk. I understand, Leona said. Toke raised a brow. Do you? Leona stood. I'll resign. Gasps followed. Jayden, sitting silently in the corner, finally looked up. I'll step down, temporarily. Let the foundation breathe. Let the story fade, she continued. This place isn't about me. It never was. It's about the kids, the mission. Jayden stared at her, conflicted. Toke nodded slowly. We'll review in 3 months. Leona left the room without looking back. Later, as the sky turned lilac and gold, she walked a long stretch of beach behind the center. Her phone buzzed again. "Dad, come home. Let the lawyers handle this." She turned the phone off. She wasn't going to let lawyers fix what honesty could. When she returned to her apartment, Jayden was waiting outside her door. "I should have said something earlier," he said. "I was angry. Not at you, at the world, at how easily it eats up people like us." She opened the door. He followed her in. They sat on the mattress, knees touching. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but I will be." He reached into his bag and handed her an envelope. Inside was a photo of her. Not from a gala or a headline, but from her first week at the center, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, surrounded by laughing children, paint streaking her cheeks. "You've given more in these 2 months than most people do a lifetime," he said. "Even if they take your name, your image, they can't take that." She felt tears rising. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that I'll lose everything again," as Jayden pulled her into his arms. "Then we'll rebuild, together." 3 weeks later, the cameras left. The headlines died down, and a new one quietly emerged. Leona Blake's foundation continues without her, but because of her. Jayden stayed. So did most of the staff. And when the dust finally settled and the world stopped watching, something even more beautiful began to grow. Not in secret, but in truth. The days felt slower now. Not in a boring way, but in a beautiful, stretched-out kind of peace. Leona's name was still whispered in the gossip blogs. Where is she now? Has she truly vanished? But the noise had softened. And more importantly, she had stopped listening. The Evelyn Foundation kept thriving under a new interim director. Leona still showed up, not as a leader, but as a quiet presence. She helped wash brushes, served food, told stories to the younger kids. The team respected her distance. Some even admired her more for stepping back. But none of that mattered as much as this. Jayden hadn't left, and their love, no longer rushed or hidden, was beginning to bloom in new, quieter ways. One evening, they walked hand in hand through Freedom Park in Lagos, a camera slung across Jayden's shoulder and a bag of puff-puff between them. It had been weeks since the media circus, and this was the first time Leona had stepped into a public space without wearing oversized sunglasses or tucking her hair into a scarf. "I'm invisible again," she joked. Jayden popped a puff-puff into her mouth. "Good. Maybe now I don't have to share you with the whole internet." She chuckled, licking sugar from her lips. "I miss this. Just being." Jayden looked at her thoughtfully. "You know, for someone who used to be on every magazine cover, you look happiest in a thrifted t-shirt and face paint." She bumped his arm playfully. "Don't expose me." They sat on a bench near a fountain, watching a group of students rehearse a dance routine. Jayden turned to her. "So, what now?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Us." It was the question they danced around for weeks, without pressure, without expectations. Their love had grown slowly again. They cooked dinner together, took long walks, fell asleep watching Nollywood classics on her tiny mattress. But they hadn't labeled it. Not yet. Leona hesitated. "I don't want to rush into something that ends up feeling like another performance." Jayden nodded. "I get that. But I know this," she continued, voice steady. "You see me, all of me. Not Leona the heiress, not Elle the lie, just me." Jayden reached into his camera bag and pulled out a photo he hadn't shown her before. It was blurry, but real. She was laughing, mid-motion, head thrown back, standing ankle-deep in water at Tarqua Bay. They had gone there on a whim weeks ago and raced waves like children. She hadn't known he'd taken the shot. He handed it to her. "That's the woman I want to keep choosing. No labels, no titles, just her." She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "Then let's stop trying to define it. Let's just be." Jayden smiled. No pressure, no plan, just love. That night, they cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen. Spaghetti and fried plantain, the only combo they both agreed on. Jayden played Asa's Bibanki through his speaker. Leona danced barefoot, hair undone, a dish rag over her shoulder like an apron. He watched her, eyes soft. "What?" she asked, laughing. "Nothing," he said. I never imagined the woman in those glossy photos could look even more beautiful in a kitchen stirring pepper sauce." She approached him slowly, their eyes locked. "You're not in love with a fantasy, are you?" she teased. He wrapped his arms around her waist. "No, I'm in love with the woman who stopped pretending." They kissed, not urgently, not like they were trying to prove anything, but slowly, like home. The next morning, Leona woke up before him. The sun streamed in through the small window. Jayden's arm was draped lazily over her waist. She stared at the ceiling and smiled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being pulled in two directions. She wasn't wondering how to be enough. She was enough. In this quiet, in this space, in this love that needed no spotlight. Later that week, Jayden invited her to a photography exhibit he'd been working on, his first solo showcase in Lagos. It was held in a small gallery downtown, with soft lighting and jazz music playing in the background. Leona walked in and was stunned. The exhibit was titled Unmasked. Every photo was of ordinary people, unposed, unfiltered, raw moments of laughter, grief, joy, and stillness. And at the center wall, a series of 6 portraits, all of her. Not the Leona Blake the world knew, but the woman who painted murals, cried on rooftops, braided a little girl's hair at the center, stared into Jayden's camera while wiping sweat from her brow. Each one captioned with a simple truth: she is not a brand. She is not a lie. She is not running anymore. She is seen. She is love. She is Leona. She stood frozen. Jayden appeared beside her. "I didn't ask for permission," he said gently. "I just needed the world to see you the way I do." She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "They finally do," she whispered. "Because you did." That night, after the crowd had thinned and the gallery had gone quiet, Jayden pulled her onto the small stage. He looked into her eyes and said, "I still don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." "No more hiding?" she asked. "No more hiding. No more pretending." He smiled. "Only becoming." She took his hand. They didn't promise forever. They didn't need to, because what they had now was more than labels or fairy tales. It was real. It was earned. It was theirs. The city was wide awake by 8 a.m., but Leona Blake stood in her modest kitchen, stirring oats in an old tin pot, barefoot, hair in a pineapple puff, wearing Jayden's oversized tee. The hum of motorcycles drifted in through the window. Somewhere down the road, gospel music played on a neighbor's stereo. The world outside was still moving fast, but inside her tiny flat, life had finally slowed to a pace she could hold. Today was a big day. The Foundation's first National Youth Art Festival, her vision, now a reality, was opening in just a few hours. Over 200 students from across Nigeria would exhibit paintings, photos, spoken word pieces, and murals they created over the past months. And Leona? For once, she wasn't just the face of something. She was its heart. Jayden walked in from the balcony, a cup of tea in his hand. "Still nervous?" he asked. She smiled, stirring her oats. "Not about the festival." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" She paused, then turned to face him. "Today, I go on stage, not as Elle, not as the daughter of Oscar Blake, just as me." Jayden stepped closer. "That's the woman the world needs." She took a deep breath. "Then I'm ready." The venue was packed. Parents, students, reporters, community leaders, all gathered under colorful tents at the festival grounds, buzzing with pride. Murals lined the fences. Local food vendors served spicy pepper soup, jollof rice, and cold zobo. Everywhere she looked, Leona saw joy. This was what she had longed for. Not applause, not recognition, but impact. When the announcer tapped the mic and introduced her, the audience erupted in cheers. Her heart thundered in her chest as she walked up to the podium, heels clicking softly on the wooden stage. Jayden stood in the front row, camera around his neck, nodding once. She held the mic, paused, and smiled. "Good morning," she began, voice clear. "Some of you know me as Leona Blake. Some of you knew me as Elle Monroe. For a long time, I didn't know who I was without those names, without the titles, without the spotlight." The crowd stilled, hanging on to every word. "I used to believe that legacy was about power, control, inheritance. But the truth is, real legacy is built in small places, in children with pain on their hands, in teachers who stay late to listen, in stories told over fried plantain and laughter." She looked out at the sea of faces. "I'm standing here today not because I'm perfect or famous, but because I got tired of pretending. I walked away from a life that looked beautiful but felt empty, and walked into a life that's messy, ordinary, and so full of meaning it takes my breath away." Applause. Not polite, but deep, real. Later that afternoon, the sky bloomed in pinks and oranges as the sun lowered. Jayden pulled her aside beneath a cluster of palm trees near the mural garden. "I want to show you something," he said. He handed her a photo album, hand-bound, leather edges, embossed with her initials. Inside were photos. Her first day at the foundation, her painting a bench, her holding a crying child, her reading to a girl with a missing front tooth, her standing barefoot in the rain, arms outstretched. At the very back was a photo she hadn't seen before. Jayden had taken it just days ago, of her standing on stage during her speech, one hand over her heart, a single tear down her cheek. "You've never looked more powerful," he said. She stared at the image, then at him. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked softly. "Doing what?" "Seeing me." Jayden smiled. "Because you let me." She took his hand and laced her fingers through his. "Jayden." "I know," he said. "You don't need to say it." "But I want to." He looked at her. "I love you," she said. He exhaled like the words unlocked something in him. "I love you too." They didn't kiss right away. They just stood there. Two people, stripped of illusions, surrounded by legacy, writing their own story. A few weeks later, Leona held a private press conference. Not at a hotel ballroom, but at the Evelyn Foundation's courtyard. There were no red carpets, no fashion stylists, no theatrics. Just a woman reclaiming her story. "I'm stepping away from the Blake Tech board indefinitely," she announced. "I will remain committed to social impact work, particularly with underserved youth across Nigeria." One journalist raised a hand. "What do you say to people who think you're running from your inheritance?" Leona smiled gently. "I'm not running. I'm rewriting. My inheritance is no longer about money. It's about meaning." Months passed. The foundation grew. So did her love with Jayden. But they never rushed. They never tried to recreate the chaos of the past. They simply built, quietly, slowly together. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with passion. But always with honesty. On the anniversary of the foundation's launch, Jayden took her to Tarkwa Bay again. They walked along the shoreline, waves lapping at their ankles. He stopped suddenly, pulled something from his pocket. A seashell with a ring inside. Simple, gold, timeless. She looked up at him. No big speech, no crowd. Just a question. "Will you keep choosing this life with me?" Leona didn't cry. She laughed, a full, radiant laugh that echoed across the water, and said, "Always." 5 years later. A breeze drifted through the sun-drenched veranda of a modest home tucked behind the hills of Ikoyi. It wasn't a mansion, but it was theirs, painted a soft sand color, with blue shutters Jayden had insisted on, and a wooden porch swing Leona had found at a local artisan market. Their front yard was wild and full of life, climbing jasmine, bursts of hibiscus, and a tiny mango tree they had planted together on the day they moved in. A hand-carved wooden sign leaned against the gate, "The Home of Becoming." Inside, laughter rang through the living room. A little girl, barefoot, curls bouncing wildly, ran in circles around the couch, giggling as her baby brother crawled after her with fierce determination. "Zara, slow down. He's not a rocket ship," Leona called from the kitchen, flour on her cheek, a mixing spoon in her hand. Jayden emerged from the hallway, camera dangling from his neck, holding a soft baby cloth like a white flag. "He's faster than he looks." Leona leaned against the doorframe, watching them all with a soft smile. Her family, her chaos, her joy. Everything she never thought she could have, at least not without pretending. Life had shifted, not by accident, but by design. The Evelyn Foundation was now a national model with 8 branches across Nigeria. Each one offered free creative programs to children who once believed their dreams didn't matter. Leona no longer ran daily operations, but she remained the spirit behind it all. She focused on mentorship, policy advocacy, and a new initiative that brought art therapy to survivors of abuse and trauma. Jayden had become one of West Africa's most respected photojournalists. His exhibits traveled from Lagos to Cape Town to London, but he still taught twice a month at the original Surulere Center. And their children? Zara was 4, fierce, curious, and already drawing portraits of everyone she met. Elle, Nico, their 1-year-old son, loved music, especially when Jayden beat spoons against pots like a drum. Their days were filled with tiny, sacred moments. Paw prints on the floor. Laughter during power outages. Long evenings on the porch swing with bare feet and wine. Soft jazz and storybooks. Quiet love. The world hadn't forgotten who Leona Blake was, but they had come to know who she chose to be. One Sunday evening, they hosted a backyard dinner. Former students of the foundation, now in university, or running their own creative businesses, filled the garden with life. Some brought partners, others brought cameras or guitars or babies of their own. At one point, a young man named Toby stood up and tapped his glass. "I just want to say thank you," he said. 5 years ago, I didn't think my life could be more than surviving. Then I walked into the Evelyn Foundation, and Miss Leona didn't just teach us how to create. She taught us we were allowed to dream. She believed in us before we knew how to believe in ourselves. Leona blinked away tears. Jayden wrapped an arm around her shoulders, kissed her temple. "You changed lives," he whispered. She leaned into him. "We changed lives." After the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Leona stood barefoot in the backyard, looking up at the stars. The same sky she used to stare at from her penthouse window, wondering what it would feel like to be free. Now she knew. It felt like this. Jayden joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I saw a headline today," he said, teasing. She groaned. "Don't start." "Relax." It said, "Leona Blake, Nigeria's quietest revolution." She turned to him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "They finally got it right." She smiled. It only took a decade. They stood there for a long time, watching the sky, listening to the distant sounds of the city they loved. "I used to think I had to be someone else to be loved," she said softly. "You don't," Jayden replied. "I know that now." He pulled her closer. "And if you ever forget, I'll remind you." She looked up at him. "We built this, didn't we?" "From nothing." "From truth," he said. She nodded. "That's everything." Later that night, as they curled into each other on the couch, Zara sleepily stumbled into the room with a drawing in her hand. "Mummy," she yawned, climbing into Leona's lap. "I drew you." Leona turned the paper over. It was a crayon sketch, messy but magical. A woman with a big heart in her chest, holding hands with a man and 2 tiny children. Behind them was a building labeled Hope. "What's this?" Leona asked. Zara beamed. "It's you. You're the heart." Jayden laughed. "She gets it." Leona kissed her daughter's forehead, and just like that, in the soft, sleepy hush of midnight, she knew her name didn't matter anymore. Her wealth didn't define her. Her past didn't own her. She had built something stronger than legacy. She had built love. And that was the greatest truth of all.